It was a Tuesday. Late morning. I was standing in my garage reorganizing some old blueprints I hadn't touched in years when my phone rang. The name that flashed across the screen, Tom Esposito, was one I hadn't seen in a decade. We'd worked together back when I still cared about awards and magazine spreads, back when clients wanted their buildings to look like something out of a dream. He was always good for a story, a drink, or both. "Mike," he said, voice warm like nothing had changed. "Man, it's been too long. Listen, I won't keep you. I just wanted to say congrats." My mind flickered. "Congrats for what?" "For the wedding," he said. "Heard your daughter's getting married next month at the Miramar estate. That's a hell of a venue." I felt something give, like a rib cracking silently inside me. My fingers stayed still, resting on the edge of an old drawing board. I swallowed once. I managed. "Yeah, that's something." He laughed, filling in my silence with his own assumptions. "I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. You must be proud." I mumbled something. I don't even remember what. We wrapped up the call with the usual pleasantries, promises to catch up that we both knew were empty. And then I just stood there, the hum of the fluorescent bulb above me louder than it had ever been. That was how I found out my daughter was getting married. Not through an invitation, not through a phone call or even a text, but from a man I hadn't spoken to in years, offering congratulations I didn't know I didn't deserve. I spent the rest of the day pretending it didn't matter. Went back to my blueprints. Cleaned a shelf that didn't need cleaning. Brewed coffee I didn't drink. The hours moved like syrup. And all the while, that sentence echoed like a drumbeat in my mind. She's getting married. And I wasn't invited. It's strange how grief sneaks up on you. Not like a wave, but more like dust settling in a room until you realize you can't breathe. I thought we had time. I thought maybe she'd come around. 5 years is long, but not forever. People forgive, don't they? She was 26 now. The last time we spoke, she was barely 21. It ended in silence, not screaming. A cold departure. No one slammed a door. She just stopped replying. Moved out quietly. A few terse messages. And then nothing. I kept her birthday marked on the calendar. Sent cards. Once, a long email I never heard back from. When her college graduation came and went, I stayed off social media for a month, afraid to see photos of a life I wasn't part of. Now this. I tried not to take it personally. Maybe it was a small ceremony. Maybe invitations hadn't gone out yet. Maybe, but I knew better. Tom said next month. That meant plans were set. Money was spent. Vows probably already written. The venue, the Miramar estate, was no last-minute booking. It was old, expensive, and sacred in the kind of way that mattered to people who wanted fairy tale weddings. I remembered taking her there when she was 7, feeding koi by the pond. The irony cut deeper than I expected. That night, I poured myself a scotch and sat on the back porch. The sky was quiet. The breeze barely moved. I imagined her in a white dress, smiling in the mirror, laughing with people I'd never met. I imagined her walking down the aisle with someone else on her arm. Not me. And I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't broken, but because I'd forgotten how. The thing about broken glass is that it doesn't shatter all at once. It fractures slowly, thin lines crawling from the center outward, quiet and precise, until suddenly the whole pane gives way. By the time you notice it's broken, it's already too late. That's how it happened with Emily. It wasn't a single argument, or one terrible moment. It was a series of small decisions, silences, hesitations. And then one day, she was gone. My wife, her mother, passed away when Emily was 15. It was cancer. Fast, merciless. The kind that leaves rooms half-painted and tea mugs still warm on the nightstand. We grieved in different ways. I drowned in logistics and quiet. Emily retreated into headphones and midnight tears I pretended not to hear. We held each other through the first year. Her grades dropped. I didn't push. She stopped going to piano lessons. I said nothing. There were nights she sat by the fireplace with her mother's scarf draped over her shoulders like armor. I remember thinking how much she looked like her, so much so that it hurt to look too long. 3 years later, I met Lauren. She was kind, steady, practical. Not the poetic soul my first wife had been, but she listened when I talked and reminded me to eat on days I forgot how. We met at a city planning board meeting, fought over a zoning proposal actually. She called me arrogant before we even exchanged names. Maybe that's why I liked her. Telling Emily was difficult. She was 18 by then. Senior year. We sat on the couch, me and Lauren, side by side. Emily perched on the edge of the armchair like it might launch her out of the house at any moment. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just nodded. Said, okay. But her eyes stopped meeting mine. The weeks that followed were strange. Her laughter faded. Her texts became monosyllables. She started spending more time at her boyfriend's place than at her friend Maya's. One weekend, she didn't come home at all. I called. No answer. Lauren tried to reach out. The silence was louder than any argument we might have had. Still, I thought it was a phase. Just adjustment. People take time. But time became space, and space became absence. The real fight, if you can even call it that, came 6 months later. We were in the kitchen. Sunday morning. Emily had just come back from a weekend trip. She dropped her bag at the door, grabbed a glass of water, and I asked her to stay for breakfast. She said she had plans. I said we never see her anymore. She said, you replaced Mom like she was a piece of furniture. That was the fracture. I told her that wasn't fair. That people need companionship. That grief doesn't come with rules. She said I was selfish. That Lauren hovered over her like a substitute teacher trying to pretend she belonged. I said she never gave Lauren a chance. She said I never asked what she needed. The argument wasn't long, but it was sharp. Final. I don't know who you are anymore, she said. I remember staring at the kitchen window behind her, watching a hummingbird hang in midair, wings blurred. I wanted to say something. Anything. But everything I thought of felt either defensive or weak. When she walked out, the door didn't slam, just closed with a slow, almost respectful click. That hurt more. She moved out 2 weeks later. Left a note on the counter. I'll send you my new address once I'm settled. Please don't come by. I honored it. Maybe that was my mistake. I kept up the effort at first. Texts, emails, birthday cards. Lauren tried too. But silence has a way of hardening into stone. Over time, I convinced myself I was giving her space. That she'd come back when she was ready. That all wounds just needed time. But time isn't a healer. It's a mirror. And the longer you stare, the more you see what you didn't want to. There were nights I sat in her old room, running my fingers along the dusty spines of her favorite books. She'd left most of them behind. Some still had notes in the margins, little jokes, observations, things she never said aloud. Her handwriting hadn't changed since high school. Curved. Slanted. Defiant. I found a photo once, me, her, and her mother at the Botanical Gardens. Emily was 9. Smiling. Missing her front teeth. I kept it tucked behind my desk lamp, out of view but never far. People say fatherhood is about protection. But sometimes, it's just about being there when they fall. I wasn't. And maybe she couldn't forgive that. Maybe I couldn't forgive myself either. It was the name that caught me, Miramar Estate. I saw it again a week after that call with Tom, buried in a wedding announcement on a local blog. The kind of website that listed exclusive events, styled shoots, and overpriced florists. There it was in clean serif font, Emily Tran to wed Daniel Wexler, ceremony to be held at Miramar Estate, September 9th. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because of where it was. Miramar wasn't just some estate. It wasn't just a venue. It was one of mine. Back in the late 90s, when I was still young enough to wear optimism like cologne, the estate had been a crumbling shell, a forgotten Spanish colonial relic wedged between the Pacific breeze and acres of olive trees. Developers wanted to gut it, turn it into a hotel. But preservationists fought back. The city called in experts, and I was one of them. I spent 2 years on that project. Studying sketches from the 1700s, replicating archways, restoring hand-carved balustrades. We reinforced foundations without disrupting the original stone. Even the chapel bell had to be recast in Seville, using the original alloy formula. But it wasn't just the work. It was Emily. She must have been 9 or 10. She'd tag along on weekends, a spiral notebook clutched to her chest, doodling while I met with contractors. I used to find her sitting in the fountain courtyard, legs crossed, narrating fairy tales to the pigeons. Once, she named a lizard Sir Maxwell of Tilebottom and demanded I draw up blueprints for his castle. Those were good days. Warm. Sun-soaked. I remember her chasing a red balloon down the main lawn, laughing, her voice echoing off stucco and stone. The estate felt alive when she was there, like the place remembered her. And now, after all these years, after all that silence, she chose that place. My place. Our place. I wasn't sure if it was coincidence. If she even remembered. Maybe it was just beautiful. Maybe her fiancé's mother found it in a magazine. But the thought clawed at me, what if it was intentional? A silent message I wasn't meant to hear? I zoomed in on the photo attached to the post. The estate looked pristine. Better than when I left it. The arches were bathed in golden light. White chairs lined the colonnade. I could almost smell the rosemary hedges from my screen. My stomach tightened. Not with anger. Not even grief. Something more tangled, like nostalgia soaked in vinegar. I closed the browser and leaned back in my chair. The office was too quiet. Dust floated through the sunbeams like secrets that had nowhere left to hide. I hadn't been back to Miramar in nearly 15 years. I never had a reason. I drove by once, maybe 5 years ago. Just kept going. But now I couldn't get it out of my head. The wedding. Her dress. The applause. The way the chapel echoed. The piano I helped restore. She would stand in a place I helped resurrect, surrounded by strangers, held by someone else's arm, and I wouldn't be allowed within 10 miles. It wasn't about the venue. Not really. It was about memory. About being erased from it. And maybe that was the moment something changed. Not out of spite, but out of instinct. If she could choose the one place I helped bring back to life, maybe I could do the same. Not to ruin anything. Not to stop the wedding. But to remind her. I was still here. I didn't go looking for a fight. I went looking for answers. That weekend, I found myself in the dusty archives of the city planning office, where time seemed to move as slowly as the bureaucrats pushing paper behind fogged-up plexiglass. The clerk, young, disinterested, handed me a manila folder that smelled faintly of mildew and government neglect. Inside were blueprints, permits, zoning maps, and something else. A red tag. Not a literal one. A digital annotation, highlighted in a grainy PDF, pending resolution, zoning compliance under review. My brow furrowed. That shouldn't be there. Miramar had been grandfathered in under historic preservation law, but it had never been officially rezoned for commercial events. Back when I worked on the estate, it was strictly residential historical, with conditional access for tours. Hosting weddings required a variance, temporary, specific, and renewed per event. Most venues keep these things airtight. Too much money involved not to. But this file suggested otherwise. I took photos of everything. Back home, I poured myself a cup of tea I wouldn't drink and opened my laptop. Google led me down a rabbit hole of county board meeting minutes, real estate filings, and event permits that felt just a hair too improvised. Then I found it. A property transfer document from 9 months prior. Ownership had changed hands. The estate was now controlled by a private holding company out of Monterey Park. No website. No public-facing contact. Just a name, Maram Equity Partners. And tucked into the transfer deed, an asterisk. The sale was contingent on rezoning approval currently under municipal review. Meaning, the current owners didn't yet have the legal right to operate as a commercial event space. Meaning, they were taking bookings on paper-thin ice. I sat back in my chair. For a long time, I didn't move. The implications weren't just legal, they were leverage. I didn't want to stop the wedding, but I wanted to stop being invisible. I reached for my phone. "Brian," I said when he picked up, "do you still owe me that favor from the McPherson project?" There was a pause. Then a chuckle. "What kind of favor are we talking?" Brian Chin and I had worked together on at least 3 zoning battles over the years. He had the temperament of a sleeping fox and the teeth of a lawyer who never rushed. The kind of man who knew how to win without ever raising his voice. I laid it all out. The estate, the wedding, the lapse in zoning status. He whistled softly. "That's Risky on their part. And actionable? If they're operating commercially without clearance, absolutely. Could we acquire a stake? Possibly. Depends how desperate the owners are for cash flow. We'd have to go through a trust. Something quiet. I felt something settle in my chest. Not vengeance. Not even satisfaction. Just clarity. Like watching fog lift from glass. Over the next 2 weeks, Brian and I moved in silence. He filed paperwork for a temporary LLC Tierra Limited Holdings on my behalf. We made discreet inquiries through a broker, and to my surprise, Marram Equity responded within days. Apparently, the zoning delay had scared off a few investors. They were looking to offload partial equity, just enough to stay solvent. I bought in at 18%. Enough to get a seat at the table. Enough to require sign-off on all large events, especially ones involving third-party vendors, permits, and guest liability. The documents were signed electronically, with my name nowhere near the line. Only the LLC. Only the paper trail. I didn't tell Lauren. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't out of shame or secrecy, but necessity. The more people involved, the messier it would get. And this wasn't about noise. It was about precision. A week later, the estate's manager sent out the routine vendor checklist for upcoming events. I received a copy. There it was in black and white. Tran Wexler wedding, September 9th, 150 guests, floral setup from 6 a.m., catering from noon, ceremony at 5 p.m. My hand hovered over the document. I didn't want to ruin her day. I just wanted her to know she couldn't erase me from the story so easily. I drafted a letter, simple, professional, polite. As a minority equity partner, I am formally requesting that this event be reviewed for compliance pending zoning status confirmation. Until such matters are resolved, I cannot authorize this function to proceed. No threats. No accusations. Just legal fact. Brian reviewed it. Clean, he said. You sure you want to send it? I hesitated. Yes. That night, I slept for the first time in weeks. Not because I had won anything, but because I had finally spoken. Power, real power, doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with noise or spectacle. It moves like groundwater, silent, slow, shaping everything beneath the surface without ever breaking it. That's how I approached the purchase. The letter I sent had its intended effect. Within 72 hours, I received a cautiously worded email from the estate's event director asking to clarify expectations and resolve any misunderstandings regarding September operations. A phone number followed, along with the usual assurances that the estate prided itself on compliance and transparency. I didn't reply. Not immediately. Instead, I waited. It took 2 more days for a follow-up email to arrive, this time from a legal liaison at Marram Equity. Apparently, the letter had rattled more than just the event planner. There was concern. Not just about the wedding, but about me, who I was, what I wanted. And most of all, whether I planned to make trouble. Brian and I already had our next move ready. We'd set up a second trust, this one under the name Goldenwood Reserve. It had no connection to me publicly. No hint of architecture or family. Just a generic investment vehicle with a modest portfolio and a hunger for distressed assets. We made another offer. This one bigger. Controlling interest. 42%. We framed it as a solution. Marram Equity was already fatigued by the zoning limbo. Their private investors were nervous, and they were bleeding goodwill with every potential wedding that came with a risk flag. My offer wasn't aggressive. It was calm, precise, and fair. Market value plus a 10% premium for urgency. They didn't bite right away. But they didn't walk either. The negotiation took a week. During that time, I kept my hands busy. Repainted the shed out back. Fixed a sagging gate that had been crooked for months. I thought of Emily every morning. Not as a weapon. Not as a target. But as a daughter who had chosen silence. I still didn't know why. But I was done waiting for an invitation to speak. On the 12th day, Marram agreed. 42%. Voting rights included. Silent partnership. No board seat required, but I would have final review on all third-party contracts for the next 12 months, especially anything involving liability exposure. That included large events, external catering, and guest lists exceeding 50. In other words, I had the keys. We closed the deal with digital signatures and courier documents. Everything clean. Legal. Undeniable. My name never touched the paper, only the trust. But in every practical sense, I now owned the estate. Not all of it. Not publicly. But enough to matter. I drove out to the Miramar 2 days later. Not to make a scene. Not to gloat. Just to walk the grounds. The wrought iron gate creaked open with a touch. No one stopped me. No one knew me. I wore a cap and sunglasses, and the staff likely assumed I was an early vendor or contractor. I wandered the courtyard where Emily once named pigeons like knights. The stone tiles looked the same. The olive trees were taller. The chapel door was still painted in the same faded teal. I stood under the bell tower, where she used to spin in circles until she collapsed in a heap of giggles. The memory burned. Not because it hurt, but because it still mattered. She had been happy here. And so had I. Inside the main building, a florist was doing measurements. I watched from a distance. A small team set up white folding chairs in perfect rows. The kind of symmetry I used to care about. It all looked perfect. And it was mine. For a moment, I felt foolish. Like a man chasing shadows, trying to grab hold of something long dissolved. But then I remembered what this was about. Not control. Not vengeance. Presence. I had been erased from the story. Now I was back in the margins. Not front and center. Not crashing anything. Just a quiet signature in the architecture. A whisper in the walls. That evening, I received an email from the wedding planner, clearly unaware of the transaction. It was a template message, final confirmation of vendor access and scheduling approval required by Tuesday 5 p.m. to avoid delays. I didn't reply. Instead, I instructed Brian to send a single-line response through the trust's legal counsel, approval pending new ownership review. Please submit final compliance documentation. There was no drama. No legal threat. Just a simple reality. I was now the landlord. And the wedding would not move forward, not until I said so. I waited until the end of the business day before sending the letter. No rush. No urgency. Just a simple PDF, drafted in clean legal language and delivered through the appropriate channels. Pursuant to revised ownership agreements and standing zoning compliance procedures, it read, "No events exceeding 50 persons may proceed at Miramar Estate without explicit written authorization from the current voting representative of Goldenwood Reserve Trust." It was signed by my attorney, not me. Polite. Precise. Ironclad. I imagined the wedding planner reading it on her phone, face slowly draining of color. She wouldn't understand the full implications right away, but she'd know enough. Events like this ran on momentum, vendors booked, guests scheduled, timelines locked. Any disruption, even a small one, rippled outward like a cracked window across the whole pane. By noon the next day, my inbox had 4 messages from the planner, 3 from the venue manager, and 1 from a panicked third-party coordinator trying to confirm delivery access. None were addressed directly to me. All were urgent. I ignored them. I wasn't interested in power plays. I wasn't interested in hurting anyone. But I'd spent 5 years being left out of every conversation that mattered, and I had no intention of continuing that trend. The phone call came that evening. Blocked number. I knew. I let it ring once, then answered. "Hi," she said. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe just older. A woman now, not the girl who once asked me to build her a castle in the backyard. "Hi," I said. There was a pause. No rush to fill it. "Is it true," she asked, "that you own the estate?" "I own part of the trust that controls it," I said. "Yes." Another pause. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why would you do this?" I took a breath. Not to steel myself, but to study the weight of the moment. "Because I found out about your wedding from someone who wasn't you," I said. "And because the venue you chose is a place I built with my hands. A place you loved. A place we both shared." She didn't answer right away. "I didn't want to make this about you," she said softly. "I didn't make it about me," I replied. "You made it without me." That landed. I heard her breath shift, like she'd been punched gently in the chest. "I'm not trying to ruin your day, Emily," I said. "I'm not trying to stop anything. I wanted to be visible again. Just once." She was silent for a long time. I imagined her sitting on the edge of her bed, phone clutched tight, looking at the floor with her brow furrowed the way she used to when she didn't want to cry. Finally, she spoke. I thought you'd moved on, she said. With Lauren. With your new life. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting, I said. And I never stopped being your father. That broke something. She didn't sob. But I heard the breath hitch, the soft sound of a hand covering a mouth. A muffled moment of grief. Or guilt. Or both. I didn't know how to reach you, she whispered. I've had the same number for 20 years. Silence again. What do you want? She asked finally. Do you want to come? No, I said. I want you to have your day. But not without understanding who helped make it possible. The line stayed open. Neither of us moved. Then, gently, she said, okay. Not forgiveness. Not reunion. Just, okay. We hung up. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like I was part of the conversation again. The next call came 2 nights later. No blocked number this time. Just her name, Emily, glowing on the screen like a word I hadn't dared speak aloud in years. I answered on the second ring. She didn't say hello. Instead, she asked, did you know I still dream about that bell tower? Her voice was clear, almost steady, but laced with something heavier than nostalgia. I do, I said. Every time I hear church bells, I see you spinning under it. I used to think it could talk, she said, half laughing. Like if I said the right thing at the right time, it would ring back. You believed in magic, I said. No, she replied. I believed in you. That silenced us both. There it was, the fracture line, still glowing under the surface, still sharp. I've been thinking a lot, she said. Since the call. So have I. The pause stretched. Then she exhaled, and with it came the truth. When Mom died, you stopped looking at me. Her words didn't cut like a knife. They settled like ash, soft, heavy, impossible to ignore. I didn't know how, I admitted. You looked too much like her. And I was scared that if I looked too long, I'd fall apart. I was falling apart, she said. But you didn't see it. I saw it, I whispered. I just didn't know what to do. So I did nothing. That's what hurt the most. Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It was calm, like she'd rehearsed this 1,000 times in silence and was only now giving the speech its voice. I brought Lauren into your life too soon, I said. I see that now. She wasn't the problem, she said. You were. I swallowed hard. You didn't ask me what I needed. You just filled the house with someone else and hoped that would fix the empty spaces. I thought, if I kept moving forward, I wouldn't collapse. And I thought if I stayed still, you might come back for me. That one hit deeper. I never left you, Emily. But you stopped being mine. The phone was quiet again. I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the shadow of the ceiling fan spinning slowly above. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Inside, the only thing I could hear was her breathing. I kept the letter you wrote me after graduation, she said. The one with the quote from Rilke. I blinked. You never responded. I didn't know how. Every word I wrote sounded like either an accusation or a cry for help. And I didn't want to beg. You wouldn't have had to. I didn't believe that. We sat in that for a while. Let the weight settle. Then, quietly, she said, I'm not mad about the estate. I'm glad. It was unexpected. But it didn't feel cruel. It wasn't meant to be. I stopped, rephrased. I wanted you to remember that I existed. That I wasn't gone. I never forgot you, she said. That should have been comforting. It wasn't. I think I wanted you to chase me, she added. To show up at my door. To fight for me. I thought giving you space was love, I said. I didn't realize it felt like abandonment. It did. She didn't say it with blame. Just truth. I'm sorry, I said. For all of it. I am too, she replied. But sorry doesn't rewind anything. No, I said. It just makes space for something new. Another pause. I'm not calling to rewrite the guest list, she said. I need you to know that. I'm not asking to be on it. Then why did you do all this? Because I couldn't bear the idea that you'd walk down that aisle surrounded by everything I built and believe I had nothing to do with it. She was quiet for a long time. I used to think you were invincible, she said. Like nothing could touch you. And when you didn't cry at Mom's funeral, I thought that meant you were fine. I wasn't. I know that now. The fan hummed above me. Her breathing filled my ear. I'm not ready to come back, she said. I'm not waiting for you to. But I wanted you to hear my voice. Not silence. Not through lawyers. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Thank you, I said. I hope it's a good wedding, she added, softer now. I hope you'd think so. I think you'll be beautiful, I said. That's all I need to know. We didn't say goodbye. We just let the line go quiet, like two people standing on opposite cliffs, listening for the echo of something they thought they'd lost. The sky was soft that morning, clouds moving slow and silver, like they'd agreed to mute the sun just enough for beauty to settle in. I parked 2 blocks down from the Miramar estate, engine off, windows cracked. The breeze smelled of lavender and warm stone. It was September 9th, Emily's wedding day. I hadn't planned to come near. But when I woke up before dawn, I found myself dressed, keys in hand, like muscle memory had taken over. I drove without music. Without coffee, just the hum of tires on pavement and a mind that refused to sit still. I gave my permission days ago. Signed the document. Everything was cleared: vendors, access, noise limits, legal liabilities. All in order. Quiet, clean. She hadn't called again after that last conversation. I hadn't expected her to. Some things don't need repetition to be understood. From my vantage point, I couldn't see much. Just the narrow break-in hedges that marked the private entrance and the slow flow of cars arriving in tidy intervals. Florists. Caterers. Then the guests. A few wandered past my car, dressed in linen suits and pastel dresses, laughing the way people do when love feels easy and far from complicated. I kept my sunglasses on, my seat tilted back just enough to look like I wasn't watching. At noon, I saw a white delivery truck ease past. I recognized the name of the florist, same company we used for her mother's memorial service. I closed my eyes for a moment. Whether she knew that or not, it didn't matter. The symmetry struck me. Time has a strange way of repeating itself, not as revenge, but as ritual. I stayed there for hours. I didn't get out. Didn't approach. I wasn't interested in spectacle. I just needed to be close. At one point, a child passed by chasing bubbles, shrieking with joy. She reminded me of Emily at 5. Back when we built forts out of blankets and made pasta on Tuesday nights because it felt like something sacred. Around 5 o'clock, the music started. I couldn't hear it clearly, just the suggestion of notes drifting on air. A faint piano, a rhythm, a cue. The ceremony had begun. I didn't picture the aisle. I didn't try to imagine the vows. I just sat still, letting the moment wash over me like a tide I didn't try to resist. Something shifted in me then. Not a revelation. Just a quiet knowing. She was never mine to keep. Children aren't possessions. They're memories that grow legs and walk away, hoping to be seen without being held too tightly. And I wasn't there to reclaim anything. I was there to bear witness, to acknowledge her joy, even if from a distance. That was enough. At 5:43, the music stopped. The guests trickled back toward their cars, faces flushed from emotion and champagne. A few passed close by, oblivious to the man in the parked sedan watching with folded hands and a calm he didn't know he still had. Then I saw her. Just for a second. Through the hedges, framed by sunlight and stucco. She was laughing. Hair pinned up, veil trailing. Holding someone's arm, maybe a friend, maybe a cousin. Her eyes caught something in the distance. Not me. But they paused. Like she sensed something. She smiled. Not wide. Not posed. Just real. And in that instant, I felt it. Not forgiveness. But grace. The wedding ended. The guests left. The music faded. I started the engine, drove away slow. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Something had changed in both of us that day. Not enough to rebuild, but enough to begin. It arrived 3 weeks later. A plain envelope, no return address, no markings except my name written in a familiar, slanted script. The moment I saw it, I knew. I sat with it in my hands for a long time, still sealed. Not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because I didn't want it to vanish too soon. After all the silence, the sudden presence of her handwriting felt like a delicate thread stretched across time. If I opened it, it would become real. But then it might also be over. Eventually I did. It was 1 page. No date. No formal greeting. just the soft indentation of her pen across warm cream paper. Dad, I don't know where to begin, so I won't try to make this perfect. The day went beautifully. That's what people keep telling me. And it did. The flowers were exactly what I pictured. The vows went smoothly. My dress didn't wrinkle, even after hours of standing and posing and being hugged by people I hadn't seen in years. But what I remember most clearly is the quiet. I don't mean silence. I mean presence, the kind that doesn't demand anything but still fills the space. I didn't see you, but I knew you were there. And that meant more than I can explain. I paused there, rereading those last two lines. All that effort, all that care not to disrupt her day, and she had felt me anyway. I've been angry at you for so long, I think I forgot how to feel anything else. It became easier to define myself by distance. Safer somehow. If I kept you out, you couldn't hurt me. Or disappoint me. Or remind me of who I used to be when things were still whole. But I also know now that in trying to protect myself, I buried things that mattered. The part of me that used to draw floor plans on napkins because you made architecture seem like magic. The girl who used to believe that broken things could still be made beautiful just by looking at them the right way. When I found out the estate was partially yours, I wasn't angry. I was confused. Then moved. It felt like something quiet but undeniable. Like a hand placed gently on a shoulder you didn't know needed steadying. I folded the letter halfway, then reopened it. My hands were trembling, but not from pain. There was something else moving through me, an ache that didn't burn but warmed. I can't promise anything. I don't have answers yet. I don't know what us looks like now or how we rebuild from years of silence. But I wanted you to know that I see you. I saw you that day, even if it was just a feeling. Even if it was only in the way the light hit the chapel stairs, or how the wind caught the trees at just the right moment. I knew. I don't want to pretend the past didn't happen. And I don't want to pretend we can erase it. But maybe, if you're willing, we can begin something new, not from scratch, but from here. Love. Emily. That was all. No postscript. No email. No phone number. Just a letter. A beginning. I read it again. Then a third time. By the fourth, I had it memorized. It's strange how little ink it takes to repair something that felt so permanently broken. Not fully healed. Not fixed. But acknowledged. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the drawer beside my bed. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because it didn't need to be displayed. It had already done what it came to do. It reminded me that I wasn't alone in my remembering. And for the first time in years, the silence between us no longer felt like an absence. It felt like an open door. The day after the wedding, I sold my share. No drama. No negotiation. Just a clean transfer signed, sealed, filed by noon. Brian handled the details. Mariam Equity bought back full control at a slight premium. They didn't ask questions. They were simply relieved to have the estate back in stable hands, with no more surprises. That was fine by me. I hadn't bought it to keep. I returned once, the following week. Not out of sentimentality. Just closure. The event was over. The guests long gone. The flower petals swept up. The chairs folded and stacked against the eastern wall of the chapel. The place looked like it was holding its breath. I let myself in using the service entrance, the same one I used back when the estate was still under restoration. The stones remembered me. The air was still warm, humming faintly with memory. I walked the main lawn, now quiet and sun-drenched. Bits of glitter clung to the grass. One white ribbon had snagged itself around the leg of a wrought iron bench and fluttered weakly in the wind. Evidence of joy. Evidence of her. I didn't linger. Just made a full circle of the grounds, past the reflecting pool, through the olive grove, beneath the bell tower. I stood there for a while, watching shadows shift across the bricks. I didn't hear the echo of laughter. I didn't chase ghosts. I simply stood and breathed. That was all I ever wanted, to be present. To be seen, even if from the edges. Not to insert myself, not to reclaim fatherhood like property, but to remind her, and myself, that I had existed in her world once. And maybe still could. The building had never been the point. Not the arches I'd restored, not the contracts I'd signed, not the leverage I'd held for a few fleeting weeks. All of that had been scaffolding. What I really wanted was something much quieter, much older. My voice. Not the one used in courtrooms or parent-teacher meetings or tense kitchen arguments, but the one that whispered stories before bed. The one that explained how concrete settles over time. The one that said, I'm still here, not to demand anything, but to matter again. Selling the estate didn't feel like surrender. It felt like exhale. Like laying down a tool you no longer need because the shape has already been carved. Emily hadn't called since the letter. She didn't need to. Her words still sat folded in my nightstand drawer, alive and waiting. I didn't know when I'd hear from her again. I didn't need a timeline. All I needed was what I'd already been given: a sliver of truth, a glimmer of grace, and a path not yet traveled but no longer closed. I touched the stone at the base of the bell tower. Warm, solid, familiar. Then I turned, walked back to my car, and didn't look back. Some people fight for love with fists or speeches. Others fight for it by learning how to step aside with dignity. I chose the latter. And I think maybe she saw that too.